Third fallacy, DNA can be used to infer the genealogy of any organism or any species regardless of circumstance or historical population dynamic. And this is a notion that I can go into a population of fruit flies or whatever I want to look at, sequence every individual and reconstruct their genealogy without consideration of what may have happened in the past, without consideration of confounding factors. Fourth, DNA conclusions are final, decisive, and free of assumptions. That's just not true. Well, let me give you a few facts. Now, the difficulty in giving a talk like this is the last thing I want you to do is walk away with this notion that you can't believe in the science because there's so many assumptions and there's so many things which can go wrong that Dr. Whiting says none of it is believable, you know, let's just all go home. You know, might as well call this the psychic network is use DNA, right? But I'm emphasizing the limitations simply because the limitations have been left out entirely in this discussion of whether DNA tells us anything about the Book of Mormon. Well, what are some of the DNA facts? It is an incredible tool for inferring history. My research program is based on DNA precisely to infer history. But experiments need to be properly designed, hypotheses need to be formulated, assumptions must be tested, analyses must be appropriate for the data at hand, and the conclusions are the best current estimate, but open to revision with additional data and or analytical tools. Let me drive the point home for you. Okay, fruit flies. Everybody loves fruit flies, right? We did this in beginning biology. Let's assume we were testing the hypothesis that 4,000 years ago there was a wonderful fruit fly here in Provo. You can tell it's here at Provo because it's holding the BYU flag. One day, a large windstorm comes and blows it, so it lands on the home of Keone in the Hawaiian Islands. This is a very blissful fruit fly now because, you know, if you had your choice between living in Hawaii and living in Provo, you know, there's no competition. Okay. As a good fruit fly does, it reproduces and makes more fruit flies by itself. Okay? However, there are also the native fruit flies in their native fruit fly grass skirts, which are there to meet these fruit flies. And these things are reproducing with each other. Okay? And we're looking at this over a couple thousand-year period. But not only that, you have continual fruit flies being blown in from all over the world. Okay? So they are adding the genetic information to this population. My question is, could you find genetic evidence of the Hawaiian colonization of it? My answer is maybe. Okay? You could get lucky. The population dynamics might turn out that you find it. That particular genetic signature might have survived. You might have some new method of analysis which allows you to tangles all of these problems. But the fact that you did not find that genetic signature would come as no surprise to biologists who do this sort of research. Why? These are tough questions. And the oversimplification of these questions has done nothing to help this discussion and this debate. Okay, so what critics of the Book of Mormon would have you believe is that testing the DNA via testing the Book of Mormon via DNA is as simple as lining up gumballs to the machines they came from. My argument is this: if you were to take a look at the underlying pattern of genetic history, you would have a Jackson Pollock. Okay? This is called Jackson Pollock. This is, I believe, his work called Autumn. Now, is there a pattern in this? Well, yeah. Okay. I mean, if you have a very tuned eye where you can see this as an art critic, you might look and say, there is a marvelous pattern there. Is that pattern altogether obvious? Not to my eyes. Are there certain assumptions you need to look at to get at that pattern? Well, you certainly do. And this is the crux of the problem. We are trying to figure out a problem which looks something like this, and we're using means which are not well adapted to get at these kinds of problems. So, again, what I'm not saying is that all population genetic studies are bogus. Okay, if you go home and you think that Dr. Whiting gave a speech saying, don't trust DNA, don't trust population genetics, don't trust phylogenetics, you're wrong. I'm not saying that at all. I am not saying DNA is an unreliable tool. I am saying it is a tool. Like every other tool that a scientist uses, it has to be wielded properly. I don't want you thinking that the science has so many assumptions that the results are not believable, but what I am saying is this. The local colonization hypothesis is hard to test because of complications associated with the Lamanite lineage history. And in particular, to me, the things which are most striking are the problems of founder effect, drift, and the potential for extensive introgression. And again, as I say, it's not an argument because, you know, they're Lamanites and Nephites. It's what the DNA is saying. Okay, DNA doesn't care whether it's in a fruit fly or in a lamanite. Okay, it acts the same. DNA evidence is not likely to unambiguously refute nor corroborate this hypothesis, and this is an important point. This hypothesis has not been specifically tested. There has been no study which the critics have put together. They have not gone out and obtained research grants. They have not designed studies. They have not accumulated the data. They have not specifically tested this question. This hypothesis has not been tested. DNA evidence does nothing to speak to the authenticity of the text. And I want you to know, and I say this in all honesty, I would be just as critical as anyone who rose up and said, I now have DNA evidence proving the Book of Mormon is true, as I am of the critics who say we have evidence that it proves it is not true. Okay? The science is tough, and these answers do not come unambiguously. You can't claim it's scientific if you ignore the science, and that's the take-home point. Okay? And I thank you for your attention. I want to leave you with this quote from James E. Talmage, and I think we'll take a break for a moment. Thanks.